GamingBolt presents 15 easy bosses you cannot lose to even if you tried your hardest. You might have noticed that we talk about boss battles in video games a lot here at GamingBolt, but that's because they're such an important part of the experiences that define our entire industry. These exciting, thrilling encounters not only represent important points in any game's narrative, but they're also meant to be the ultimate test of your skill. Well, most of the times. Sometimes boss battles end up being more about the spectacle, which isn't necessarily always bad. Sometimes they're meant as more of an introduction to the challenges the game will present to you, in which case they're inherently easier by design. While other times, they feel like it's just there to check off boxes, which in most cases is quite disappointing. In this feature, we're going to take a look at 15 boss fights that, for some reason or other, proved to be so easy you could waltz through them with your eyes closed. Be warned, there might be some slight spoilers ahead. The Joker, Batman Arkham Origins. The Joker boss fight in Batman Arkham Asylum gets criticism from a lot of people, more because of its contextual setup than anything else, and though the Arkham City fight is decidedly better than that one, especially because of how it ends, the fight itself is not all that memorable. The one we're speaking of here, though, is the Caped Crusaders' encounter against the Clown Prince of Gotham in the incredible and often unfairly overlooked Arkham Origins. The game might feature what is probably the best boss fight in the entire series, which is the Deathstroke fight, but it does also play host to one particularly underwhelming one. Batman's encounter against the Joker in Origins devolves to little more than quick-time events, and while it isn't offensively bad by any means, it fails to provide any sort of a challenge. Rock Titan, Kingdom Hearts. Rock Titan, aka Free XP, is not deserving of the boss descriptor. He disproves his formidable name and his hulking structure by being one of the easiest boss encounters you'll ever face. For some, this is actually a blessing, since they feel this encounter can provide a nice relaxing break in the middle of so much craziness, but others tend to feel disappointed. Well, if nothing else, at least Rock Titan is a great way to farm XP without having to do too much work. AUGST, Wild Arms 4. The very first encounter against AUGST in Wild Arms 4 is one where even if you put the controller down and just stared at the screen, you'd still take no damage at all. And that's not even an exaggeration, sadly enough. Because AUGST doesn't do any attacks, and killing this boss is just a matter of repeatedly attacking, without having to do anything else. Sure enough, in the second encounter against AUGST, he does tend to attack a little bit more, but sadly, even then, he doesn't provide much of a challenge, and while beating him on the second go-round isn't as ridiculously easy as it is the first time, it's still pretty easy. Albedo, Xenosaga Episode 2. Xenosaga games, and really all Xeno games in general, aren't known for being easy. No, not at all. Given their reputation as games that tend to provide a fair bit of challenge to the player, you'd expect the second fight against Albedo in Xenosaga Episode 2, which is technically the final boss fight of the game, to actually be difficult. In reality, it's anything but. All through the encounter, all the boss does is taunt the player, doing no damage at all, and all you have to do is just keep breaking the weak zone. Near the end, Albedo's Eternal Link move does end up bringing you down to just 1 HP, but it turns out that's just all for show and doesn't really make much of a difference at all. Markus Wolf, Might and Magic 10. Might and Magic 10 does some amount of build-up for Markus Wolf as a man you're going to have to go up against and defeat. Hell, on 2 occasions within a short span of time you come up against him, but you can't fight him because he ends up fleeing. Surely the game is setting you up for a final challenging fight against him, right? Sadly, no. The fight against Markus Wolf finally happens on the 3rd attempt, but all it really takes to bring him down is just 1 hit. Literally, 1 hit. That's all it takes. Why not just make him a cutscene then, huh? Peace Walker, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. With the exception of the Phantom Pain, the Metal Gear Solid series featured a bevy of incredible and memorable boss fights, and the PSP title Peace Walker was no different in this regard. Owing to its very nature, it was a game that was brimming with boss encounters, and most, if not all of them, proved to be appropriately challenging, and as a result, quite memorable. Naked Snake's encounter against Peace Walker at the end of Chapter 3, though, much less so. This is perhaps the easiest boss fight in the entire game, with Peace Walker itself having a very limited moveset, and the attacks that it does have are pretty easily avoidable. Make use of LAW missiles, and it pretty much becomes a cakewalk. Billy Gray, Grand Theft Auto 4: The Lost and the Damned. Here's the thing about Billy Gray that bugs me the most. Your final encounter against him is a cutscene. A short cutscene where you approach him, there's an exchange of dialogue, and then you shoot him in the head. The entire DLC builds up to this moment, and you expect it to be suitably challenging, at least in some way, but it fails to do that in any way. Sure, there's a pretty big shootout leading up to that moment, but really that shootout itself isn't all that difficult. Hell, even in GTA 4, there are more shootouts and firefights that prove to be much more challenging. ATHETOS, AXIOM VERGE. AXIOM VERGE is a game that can provide a fair bit of challenge every now and then, which is to be expected given the fact that it's a game that takes heavily from classic Metroid titles. But the final boss fight against ATHETOS does not really do that, which is a little disappointing. The fight is certainly not as easy as some of the others mentioned in this feature, but standing in a corner, locking and shooting continuously is very much a viable tactic, at least on normal difficulty. Sure, some of the projectile attacks might hit you, but shooting at the sentries that keep coming your way nets you with generous health replenishments, so losing too much of health never really becomes that much of an issue. Almost every single boss, Kirby's Epic Yarn. Kirby's Epic Yarn, by design, is not a game that is meant to be challenging. I mean, simply looking at its visual style and even a few seconds of its gameplay can confirm that assertion. But actually playing it, you realize that even in the moments where it should provide at least a fair bit of difficulty, it's still a breeze. This isn't a knock on the game itself, which is a leisurely, enjoyable, and charming experience, and admittedly, not one that even wants to challenge its players, but almost every single boss fight in the game is so easy you have to wonder why they were even in there to begin with. Bowser Jr., New Super Mario Bros. Wii. You might go into the boss fight against Bowser Jr. in World 8 of New Super Mario Bros. Wii expecting at least a semblance of a challenge, but even with a crippling injury to your fingers, you could breeze right past this encounter without really any issues. All he does is throw fireballs at you from a distance, one at a time, and their pace is so ridiculously slow, you'd pretty much have to be standing absolutely still to get hit by them. He throws bombs at you too, which also move at a similarly slow speed, and all you have to do is jump on the bouncy ground to make it rebound upwards and crash into Bowser Jr. Do that thrice and it's game over for the son of King Koopa. Bowser Jr., you bring shame to the Bowser name. Your father would not be proud of you. Well, actually. Bowser, New Super Mario Bros. U. For all his fearsome looks and the legend he's built around himself as a serial kidnapper of princesses, King Koopa Bowser has proven to be a disappointingly easy boss in way too many Mario games. But perhaps the easiest of all the fights against him comes in New Super Mario Bros. U. Beating him by destroying the bridge underneath him has long been a tradition of side-scrolling Super Mario games, and here it's even easier than ever before. He tries to make a pitiful effort of spitting fireballs at you, but these attacks are ridiculously easy to dodge. Ultimately, the entire thing is over in a handful of seconds, and you're left wondering why Princess Peach couldn't have just beaten him by herself. Big BOB-OMB, Super Mario 64. Big BOB-OMB is a prime example of early, or the very first, boss fights in video games that are ridiculously easy, but intentionally so. Acting more as introductions for what lies ahead, these encounters are designed in a way that are not meant to be challenging, but to introduce players to important mechanics. In that, Big BOB-OMB succeeds, but as a result, beating him is ridiculously easy. It takes barely a minute or so to beat him, and perhaps the only way to actually take damage during this fight is by accidentally falling off the cliff, which, to be fair, isn't all that uncommon. Old King Cole, BANJO-TOOIE. Old King Cole, the poster boy for bosses that look huge and intimidating, but are easier to beat than a goldfish out of water. Going into this fight, simply looking at Old King Cole might give you the impression that you're in for a tough time, but that couldn't be further off the mark. All you have to do is stand on a rock, and after that, just keep throwing ice eggs his way. It's all over within seconds, and frankly, if not for his visual design, it'd be hard to even remember who or what Old King Cole was. Cloud and Candy, Yoshi's Story. This is what you have to do to be defeated by Cloud and Candy in Yoshi's Story. Stand absolutely still. Wait a few minutes. Maybe he kills you. Now, this is what you have to do to beat him. Actually, it takes about the same amount of effort. Lick him. Seriously, lick him. Do it a few times, move at a snail's pace whenever he tries to jump on you. In a flash, the fight's over. You know a boss fight is ridiculously easy when it's over in literally 30 seconds. PAPU, Crash Bandicoot. Crash Bandicoot and its sequels can be insanely hard when they want to be. Surely you've read countless articles and watched countless videos from a number of outlets that chronicle tales of broken controllers and blood pressure shooting through the roof due to Crash's insanely difficult moments, some of which are admittedly difficult simply due to frustrating or unfair design. But PAPU, the very first boss battle in the very first Crash game, is a cakewalk. Not a boss fight at all that prepares you for the trials that you might face ahead. PAPU has limited moves, all of which are easily telegraphed, and it takes barely a handful of hits to bring him down. That's not to say that it's not fun. It does serve as a nice, fun little introduction to bosses in Crash Bandicoot, but those who might be expecting a challenge from the first boss fight might come away disappointed from PAPU. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.